List off in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to Moving Right Along, the podcast that's by young writers for young writers. We're your hosts, Kat,
Ruby,
and Ray. Before we get to the part you're all waiting for, we've got to announce the winner of the poll from the first episode.
Yep, y'all get ready for my announcer voice. Okay. Plotters, pantsers, and planters, today we see who takes the crown.
drum roll please!
So, our producer is sending it to us in 3, in 2, in 1. Oh, there it is. And the winner is Planters!
That's wrong!
I win! You're welcome!
I hate that.
You know what?
Song.
I feel like I knew it deep in my soul, because one of my friends just texted me #Team Planters, and I was like, oh no. Oh no.
Betrayal. Judas. That's Judas. That's not a friend, that's Judas.
Yeah, you know what? If you're hearing this, you know who you are.
Your friend's right, though. Planters are superior. And the poll told us so.
Wait, who came last?
So it was obviously Planters in first, and
I knew
then
who's gonna be
Plotters in second, and Pantsers
I
last.
knew it. It's okay. I'll just go on being ostracized by the entire writing community. It's alright. I'm not sad.
So sad. Oh, so sad.
Aw.
Okay, anyways, before I burst into tears, we should probably get into the main bit about our episode instead of how I'm a loser now.
That's right.
So what are we looking about today? What were we doing last time?
So last episode we touched on what constitutes real writing. We talked about fan fiction, YA fiction classics, screenplays, everything, and it's all writing.
Yeah, they are all writing, and they also all have something in common that we think we should talk about today. Something that's very, very important to be aware of when you're writing.
And our topic today is misogyny in writing. And whether or not you're a woman, misogyny is apparent in a lot of ways. Small and subtle nuances we grow accustomed to accepting in writing, and then blatant objectifying comments that appear in outdated literature. It's kind of everywhere, it's kind of unavoidable, and it's just something that we think is really important to talk about.
So if you're wondering what misogyny actually is, because it's a big word, it is defined as the ingrained prejudice against women. So yeah, you know what? You'll understand it by the end of this episode.
While in literature it may seem harmless, it impacts everyone, especially young girls reading YA. The issue isn't how men write women, it's how women are written in accordance to what society expects of them, and not as realistic human women. This set of standards is impossible to rationally achieve, and leads readers to doubt their abilities and worth, even perpetuating harmful rhetoric about femininity as a whole.
And these instances create these expectations for every woman and feminine presenting individual, making a sort of competition between us.
I mean, let's be real. There shouldn't be a competition to be a woman. And we're all in this together, as the wise words of the High School Musical writer Kenny Ortega put. And we're all just... and at the end of the day, we're all just doing our best to achieve our own goals and make others happy, right?
Exactly.
And it's really interesting that you mentioned High School Musical, because High School Musical is actually one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. Because in High School Musical, as we clearly see through the character Sharpay, things such as femininity and especially the colour of pink is demonized. And so we want to talk a little bit about why this is, why it's bad especially, and what is the history behind it. Now, you might be wondering, why have we decided to do this episode today? And I will give you I will give you my really complicated explanation that I gave to our producer for why we should do it today. So, you may have noticed that this episode is coming out on October 2nd. Now, October 2nd comes before October 3rd. Guess what October 3rd is? October 3rd is National Mean Girls Days. For those who don't know, Mean Girls is a film that explores a lot about toxic femininity and toxic friendship groups within females, and it also has a lot of commentary about how the relationship of females to each other and things like that, and also includes, like we said earlier, that demonization of pink and femininity. And we're just going to explore a little bit about why these sort of things happen, especially in the early 2000s, when there was sort of this pushback against the idea of this very feminine girl, and then through that the creation of the not like other girls trope, especially emblematic in the character of Janice Ian from Mean Girls. So, guys, what do you think about the not like other girls trope?
It's a really good question. I think it's one that literally so many women have fallen prey to. I know I've fallen prey to it. Just like the idea of like not being like everyone else is like makes you better. Just like one thing that we're gonna talk about a lot is just the color pink. Being not like most girls meant that you didn't like pink. You liked wearing like all black. Our fellow host Kat has some experience with not liking Hello Kitty. Why did you?
Yeah, I do. I might have been in a very severe not like other girls case when I was about 11, and I had a very beautiful Hello Kitty pencil case, and I thought to myself, you know, I wanted to be so much not like other girls. This is so cringy to admit. I crossed out the kitty part of it and I wrote Hello Death to show that I was not like other girls, because I was clearly a bit violent apparently as a child. But that is that is a great example, I think, of how that not like other girls things infiltrates all of our lives, and a lot of us internalize that from the literature we read. I mean, Ray, what are your experiences with the not like other girls sort of thing?
Yeah, I went through pretty much everything, you know, Ruby said, the whole, I hate pink, I'm never gonna, like, I think my grandma bought me a sweater that was like pink once, and I nearly threw up because I hated it. I would not talk to any of the girls in my class that wore pink. It was really bad. It was really, really bad. And I brought up a lot of other girls down for wearing pink and being okay with their femininity. And it took me I'm a very feminine person, and it took me even longer to be comfortable with that because of what I read in these books. And I always loved the color pink, but when I started reading more YA books, when I started to kind of get into that genre more and move on from kids books, I started seeing that kind of trope. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was a kid. But after that, I kind of started to hate the pink. I ended up like repainting my room. I went like, you know, I pretty much threw out every feminine piece of clothing I had in my closet or refused to wear it. And it was a really really bad thing for me and every other girl I was friends with. And I ended up actually being friends with a lot of boys in elementary school, specifically 5th grade. That was kind of like the height of my not like other girls period of life. I would not be friends with any, you know, the girly girls. But like, I'm a girly girl. I'm literally a girly girl. And I wouldn't be friends with any of them because I was so like, oh, I'm not like other girls. I'm friends with boys. And I was like, that's great, but stop bringing everybody else down.
And yeah, I think the not like other girls narrative is something that I think we've all experienced, and I think that it's so prominent. But I think misogyny can infiltrate our lives in so many ways, and we're young, you know, that's our thing, we're young writers, but even though we're young, we all still have all of our own experiences, and even like our own ways that we've been misogynistic, specifically in literature and everything. So
the reason why we first opened up with our own experiences of, you know, our internalized misogyny is to talk about how, one, we got it from literature we read. I mean, I remember as a child reading a lot of, especially, did anyone ever read The Dog Diaries? I read that book.
yes.
Don't you agree that book was so, it was all about the idea that being a quirky girl was better than being a pretty girl, which is like, you know, you're allowed to like traditionally feminine things. You don't have to be quirky to be valuable. And I definitely sort of read these kind of books, sort of the Dog Diaries and things like that, and thought to myself that my own characters had to be very kind of masculine, or the idea that strength was only sort of in masculine forms, that you know, you see in films and stuff like that, spies and things like that, strong female superheroes are always strong in a masculine way, in that they're very physically strong rather than strong in a feminine way, because there are feminine ways to be strong, you know, being kind and caring despite whether people are kind and caring back to you. That is a very, you know, traditionally feminine way of being strong. So I think it's really important to acknowledge our own experiences with misogyny, to make sure that we're not writing that in our own books, because if you write that and then you give that to a little kid, they will then in turn internalize that misogyny, and then so on and so forth. The cycle continues. So what do you guys have any experiences in writing sort of when you were younger writing things that you thought you're looking back at and you're going, wow, that was kind of misogynistic?
Yeah, honestly, I never realized it. So when I was younger, I was very much like, I'm a feminist. Women power. And that's very much how I was raised. I come from a family where I have 3 sisters, so it's a lot of girls. And my mom, and then the only man in the house is my dad. And he's very feminist. He's very like pro equality. Like he's great. But because of that, I think I was determined to be a feminist, and I wanted that to be reflected in my writing. But I think literature impacted me in so many ways. And I think what it did in regards to my writing is that it impacted my perspective on myself, which therefore translated into my writing. So I think I grew up like reading about these protagonists who were like, they were skinny, they were beautiful, but they didn't know it. They were sassy, they had all these witty comebacks, and you know, they weren't inherently kind, they weren't like bubbly. The bubbly ones were like seen as annoying and like just like ugh. That was a gross noise, I'm sorry. But I think I took so much of that upon myself. If you ever meet me in person, and you can probably tell also on the podcast, I'm a very
You can
bubbly
definitely tell on
person.
the podcast.
Oh my gosh. I'm a very I'm a very bubbly, I'm very excited. I would describe myself as not witty, but I'm not like, I don't have all these like savage remarks to make or anything. That's not really like my thing, and that's just not who I am. But then I started feeling like, wow, I'm not good enough because I don't have this personality that these YA protagonists have. And these YA protagonists, they get everything. They get the guy, they get like the chance to like rule a kingdom or something. Like they just get all this stuff. And so I think I internalized that, and my perspective on myself ended up reflecting on my writing, where I always wrote these protagonists that were just like, weren't really feminine. They were kind of like, they were always sassy, always like with like a quip. I don't know if you guys know Selena from Throne of Glass. I literally was determined to write the next her. And she's a very unique character, but I think that she's such a clear reflection of that not like most girls kind of girl. And so I think just in my own writing, it's happened so many times.
Yeah, for me, I was very, very largely influenced, and you can tell from last episode when I mentioned my fanfiction, my Percy Jackson fanfiction, I was very largely influenced by Rick Riordan and his works. But I like really like loved those books as a kid. Many other writers, we all kind of, so you gotta go through a Percy Jackson phase at some point. You just, most people do, and I definitely did, and I really looked up to a lot of those characters. Annabeth was one of my favorite people, well, fictional people, in like the entirety of the world. She was so cool. She still is cool. But the problem with the Percy Jackson books that I've kind of realized, honestly, just in the past week, and I reread one of them the other day, and I was like, wow, I actually really noticed this, was that all of the characters that were, well, the female characters that were strong and fighting, and they weren't feminine. Annabeth definitely is not feminine. Talia isn't feminine. Reina's a big example in the second series. She's not feminine at all. Most of the female characters aren't feminine, and one of the only feminine characters I can think of in that series is from the Aphrodite Cabin, and those girls are very feminine, but they're not fighters, and that's the problem. The problem is that the women who aren't fighters are feminine. It's kind of portrayed in a way that you can't be feminine and be strong at the same time. I actually didn't really start writing until maybe earlier this year. Maybe like midway through 2020 is when I started actually taking it seriously. And by then I kind of blew over the whole phase, so it hasn't really reflected on my writing that much. But it's definitely still there, because it's a very hard thing to kind of realize that's there and overcome it, because it's what's so normalized and we're so accustomed to it.
Something that I thought was really interesting you said is sort of touched upon is the fact that you didn't really see yourself represented in the females of the females. I don't know why I said it like that. The women or the girls of the Percy Jackson series, because I think that is such a big problem, is that when we don't, especially as young girls, we don't see ourselves represented. The ordinary girls, the girls who can't flip a man across a room or whatever. And I think that's also 10 times worse if you're a person of color, because as a child it was like it was like really bad if you're a girl, and then 10 times worse if you're a girl and a person of color, because then it was just like you would only get to be the quippy side character who doesn't get a love interest. And I definitely internalized that as well in my own writing, in that for a long time I only wrote about like purely white protagonist girls who were also not like other girls, because I had internalized so much of that from my own childhood, from not seeing like anyone who kind of looked like me apart from Mulan, which I was Mulan in every World Book Day. It was just me. Everyone was like, you should be Mulan, and I'm like, now I'm older, I'm like, why was I always Mulan? But yeah, so I think that's why it's really, really important to talk about these sort of tropes and the portrayal of women in literature, especially in children's literature, because and also for not just young girls, but for young boys as well, because I'm sure we've all noticed this trend in that books with male protagonists are seen for everyone, right? Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, they're seen for everyone. That's considered a book for both genders, all genders, right? Books with female protagonists are seen as girly books. They're seen as not to be taken as seriously. It's so hard. It was so hard. I remember most of my books reading up as a child had male protagonists because I didn't want to be seen as reading the girly books. The only book I remember reading that was for all genders was Skullduggery Pleasant with a female protagonist, but even that had a half male, half female protagonist. Not half male, half female protagonist, but it was like kind of split protagonist. Yeah, so what do you guys think? What do you think of sort of gender split in writing as in children's writing?
I think you're so right. And I'm a big fantasy fan. I grew up reading fantasy. And the fantasy genre beyond YA is very male dominated. YA fantasy with like girl protagonists has become very popular. But only in YA. In like the grand scheme of books and the grand scheme of literature, almost all of them are about men. And so I know that was hard for me. Just like reading it and being like, why are they all boys? Like, I want to read about a girl. Which, was definitely difficult. But I think you're so right, Kat. Like, girl protagonist books are for girls, and then boy protagonist books are for everyone. Like, I think that's such a valid point that's happened. And I think if there is a YA female protagonist, she's so, like, glamorized. Like, she has to be this certain way. Like, she has to be beautiful. She has to be, like she has to be white. She has to be skinny. She has to be pretty. She has to be conventionally attractive. And I think, representation in YA really it's grown, but I think it has a long way to go. An example from my own life, I'm a, like, mid-sized kind of person, and almost all, like, YA protagonists are, like, super skinny. And I took that to heart when I was younger, and it really damaged me as a person, of like feeling like, okay, so if my body is worthy, if my body is just as good as anybody else's, then why is it that all the protagonists I read are always like these skinny girls? All the skinny girls always get the guys. And I think even in today's YA, like, I can only think of a few examples of books where the protagonist is plus sized and she's not, like, and she gets a guy and, like, she's romanticized, despite even, like, with her body type. I feel like that's such a big issue, but I think that's one that I've definitely noticed.
Yeah, and speaking what you were just talking about with the whole, like, protagonist being skinny, I really want to talk about this because I'm also a very, like, mid-sized person. So reading this literature, the thing with, plus-size girls and everybody else is that girls who aren't, and I quote, skinny, or even just have, a healthy body, are always incredibly insecure. And maybe this isn't so much with, like, fantasy and everything, but I know I'm a huge, like, contemporary kind of writer. I read a lot of those books, and in those books, every girl who's plus-sized or not skinny is insecure. They hate their body, they hate everything about them, and it's really bad because it's like, no, they are beautiful. They're just not conventionally beautiful. And we don't show young girls that, even if you're plus sized, you're still beautiful. Like, you're adorable. Keep going. But, like, and another thing with this, there's a lot to dissect with this whole plus size character thing. They're never the main character, like Ruby said, ever. They're always a side character. And they never, quote, get the guy because they're not seen as pretty. The guys don't like them. Another trope is the whole, a girl had a glow up because she went from being plus sized to being skinny. But that's the problem with it in literature, and it's something I saw a lot growing up. And I cannot name a singular plus sized character in a book that I really like. Like I can't name one off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think when we think of plus size characters, I think the immediate name is like Nina Zenik that comes to mind. And I think, well, because Nina's very romanticized, like, and everybody acknowledges that she's beautiful, but she is a plus size character. So Nina Zenik from Six of Crows. I forgot to clarify what book that's from. Oh my gosh.
It's like Nina
Yeah.
Zenik. Yeah, it's Nina her name. I think that's really, talking about body image and things like that is also discussing the sort of male gaze versus female gaze in regards to the female body, in that especially in male fiction. Have you guys ever read those men writing women things where
Oh my gosh,
the men
yeah.
yeah,
They're so bad.
it's so bad, and it's so kind of it's infiltrated so much of our literature in the way that men write women, where they talk about their bodies as if it's this object essentially. And especially if, for example, you have like big boobs or something like that, it is so overtly sexualized, which then leads to girls with big boobs being overtly sexualized everywhere, because literature says that it's okay for a man to describe in like 20 paragraphs how like a woman's body looks. And I think, when we have these kind of body discussions in literature, we need to be really, really careful about the language we use to just sort of present bodies as normal. It's just a body we live in, It doesn't have to be sexualized to be worthy. It doesn't have to be traditionally beautiful to be worthy. It can just be a body without having to be this like beautiful goddess Venus thing, which she then uses to seduce men and stuff like that, because it's just icky, isn't it? It's just icky. It's just that's a word. That's the word we're using. It's icky. It's not nice.
It is icky. I think the objectification of women is just such a major issue in misogyny, and that definitely leaks into literature, like you were saying, Kat. Like even women can be put in books like just to function as a plot device, and even like characters function as plot devices, yeah, that's fine. But a character who's there throughout the whole entire series, who's there in every scene, who's a woman, whose sole function is just to help, like, the male MC. I've seen that so many times. And honestly, I never realized, but now it, like, kind of breaks my heart that I'm like, this woman is here just to serve a purpose and just to serve a man. And just, like, to be a love interest or to be a hot body to look at, or, like, that whole... I don't think I'm saying this right. Femme fatale, I think that's how you say it.
It's femme fatale.
Oh my gosh, femme fatale.
It's femme fatale. But yeah,
I can't pronounce anything. Okay, yeah, but the whole like femme fatale, how literally the whole purpose they serve is to please male viewers. And in this case male readers, but also just that is in movies as well, like the character that's just there so that the men will be interested. That she's not there to develop, she's not there to change, she's very static character. Yeah, so I think it is so eye-opening, honestly, just the discussion about misogyny in literature. And I feel like even just talking with you guys today, I feel like I've learned so much that I never had really noticed before. But these are the sort of things that we should be noticing, that we should be picking out, that we should be not reflecting in our own writing.
Something I want to talk about before we move on is when you were mentioning the thing about the idea of just the woman being there throughout the entire film without having any plot purpose to themselves. Have you heard of the sexy lamp thing?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So for those who don't know, basically, there's a test to see whether you're being a bit misogynistic with your female character is, could they be replaced with a sexy lamp? Essentially, do they have any agency of themselves? As in, do they have any control of their own lives or their own plot lines? Or are they just used as a function for the man to A, go save, or B, to go, wow, you are a sexy lamp, basically. So if you are wondering, there are a couple of tests that you can do, because I know some of you might be thinking, I don't know now how to write female characters without being misogynistic. So the sexy lamp test is another one. Do any of you guys know of any of the other tests that you can do to check if there's misogyny in your, or like if you're writing well developed female characters? Do any of you guys have any tips?
Isn't the Bechdel?
You are saying that one, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. But basically that's like, do two female characters in your story, when they're having a conversation, do they talk about anything to do with a man? And it's basically, you look at that and you're like, if the only thing they ever talk about is a man, like, you did not pass the Bechdel test. So just think about that, like how much of these women's lives is centered around men. Because I mean, I think another test is just look at the real women around you. Like, just look at them and try and take in what kind of people they are. Like, we want to reflect that in our literature. We want to reflect that in our own writing of real women with real stories, and stories that have real power. Because a good portrayal of a woman in literature, honestly, just like, I think it means the world to me, and it's meant the world to me forever, and I'm sure most readers feel the same, at least.
I think there's also the fridging test, I think. I don't know if I'm saying this right. It's basically when you kill off a female character solely to cause pain to the male character. So, you know, I think I might be lying to you. It's basically, do you remember those, have you ever watched one of those, like, either detective film or action films where the guy is at the beginning and he's, like, watching a projector screen of his wife, like, laughing, and she's looking back at him while they're on the beach and stuff like that? It's very specific, but it happens a lot, right? So in those films, the woman, the wife, essentially, is killed off solely so that the man will have reason to go commit vengeance or whatever, right? And the problem is that when you have, there's nothing wrong with killing off a character to cause pain to your main character. I mean, you know, there's a little bit wrong.
Kind of what we do, you know.
Yeah, it's fine to do it. But the problem is when your only female character's purpose is only to be murdered off so that the male character can have pain and anguish and sit in the dark with all the lights off and, like, drink from a whiskey bottle. If that is the only reason that you're having your main character's wife die, and you're not saying that she's a full person, especially not realizing her as a full person, as in making her completely perfect with zero flaws, then you're not really writing real women, you're just writing plot devices, and that's not reflective in the real world, in that, you know, females, we do not exist to just simply serve as plot devices to go get murdered so that our male companions can go kill someone for us in revenge.
The only other one that I can think of off the top of my mind is I think what was it, an acceptance speech or something like that. Reese, I'm gonna say this name right, Reese Witherspoon. Okay, there we go. She said she has a way of seeing, like, if this movie is misogynistic or not. She'll look, and she has this line, and it'll take her, like, 2 seconds to figure out if a movie's misogynistic or not, because she'll just think, if these two characters, like, a girl and a guy, woman, man, I don't know, they're, like, in the middle of a crisis, you know, a big, like, dramatic situation, and if the woman turns to the man and she's like, what do we do now? It's like, okay, yeah. Come on, you have some thoughts here, girl. You can do it. I believe in you. But transitioning onto something else we should talk about, talking about the whole Kat, I know you touched on this a bit, the whole dark and brooding kind of trope in men. And the thing is, misogyny in writing and literature isn't just about women. Men are actually included in this as well. So, talking about this whole dark and brooding type, sometimes they have a troubled past, or, you know, they're not friendly with anyone but the glorified female protagonist, but sometimes they're not even friendly with her. And in all honesty, these guys aren't even close to realistic either. You know, it kind of sucks to see these amazing, you know, women characters that have so much on their own, so much going on for them, and they fall madly in love with this guy. This woman has such an amazing, you know, backstory on her own. She's such an amazing character, and she has such great potential, and she falls in love with this guy instead of having her own story.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I think, yeah, definitely talking about toxic love tropes, and also, you know, what you were saying about how misogyny affects not just women, but also men, because so often in literature and things like that, men have to be very, very masculine to be taken seriously. They're not allowed to have more feminine qualities, quote unquote feminine characteristics, like for example being very caring and nurturing, or liking the color pink. And often they have to be these sort of huge hulking men, and they're not allowed to be sensitive and stuff like that. And some people might be saying, well, what's that got to do with misogyny? That's not misogyny because it's against men. Well, actually, listen up here. Let me drop some wisdom nuggets for you. That is to do with misogyny, and here's why. It's because it's saying that being feminine, being like a traditional woman, or, quote unquote traditional woman, is bad for both women and men. Women are allowed to be more masculine because masculinity is seen as a good thing, whereas femininity is seen as a bad thing. So when you have these very masculine characters, and there's nothing wrong with having masculine characters, but you need to have a balance where you're not saying that masculine is the only way to go. You should also have characters that say that actually, they like sewing, they like wearing fashionable clothes and things like that. Whatever it is that is traditionally feminine, you should also celebrate that. What's your thoughts about that, Ruby?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all are in the patriarchy, and it affects men and it affects women, and so misogyny. But I think kind of flipping it around another way, that it affects men is that, like, the dark and brooding male characters get forgiven so easily, okay? And I'm bringing out all the Six of Crows references today, but Kaz Brecker. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Kaz Brecker just as much as the next person, okay? I think he's wonderful. But he's a mass murderer, guys. We need to acknowledge that he is a murderer, okay? You can still like him, but he's a murderer. If I knew Kaz Brecker in real life, I would call the police, okay? So we just need to acknowledge that men in YA especially get so forgiven of the actions that they take because, oh, he has like a troubled past. Like, oh my gosh, his mom, like when he was younger, like she told him once that he was like not funny, and now it's really scarred him. So it's okay that he killed someone, just like things like that come up so easily. And that's not to say that like certain elements of a past can't justify actions, because I think Kaz Brecker is another great example of that. His past really does delve into his character and make it clear why he is that way. But I think that this double standard, I don't think I've ever seen it apply to women. If a woman like messes up, then she is an unlikable female character, which is another word that, oh my gosh, it drives me crazy. Women in literature just don't get forgiven, I think, the way that men do. And delving into that whole world of unlikable female characters, I could do this all day. But literally, I've never heard that term apply to a man. It's always the woman. And I think it's largely been applied to women who take initiative, who are ambitious. Oh my gosh. Taylor Swift's song, The Man, is a perfect reflection of this. Yep. Okay? How there's this double standard. Like, if she was as ambitious as her male counterparts, she would be called the man. She would not be called, like, all the horrible insults that she's called. And I think that totally applies to literature as well.
When you talk about unlikable female characters, that really reminds me of something I read once where it says that female characters are so much like often called annoying with no reason. And if you're saying that a female character is annoying with like no particular reason, then maybe look a bit deeper into that and check out if it's actually misogyny. Would you tolerate this more from a man? And on that sort of perspective is things like Mary Sue characters and Gary Sue characters. For those who don't know, Mary Sue character is essentially a term coined to describe a character that is sort of author self-insert, and she's basically perfect and she does all the things perfectly, perfect, and everybody's in love with her and stuff like that. And someone pointed out that characters like James Bond and a lot of action film stars a lot of Gary Sue, the male equivalent of Mary Sue characters, but they do not receive as much flack as Mary Sue characters do, and that is because of dun dun dun, dun misogyny. And the problem is, misogyny. And the problem is, you can definitely criticize, female protagonists, because sometimes, they are written badly. The problem is when you can't separate the valid critiques from the actually misogynistic ones, because there are valid critiques. You definitely should critique them validly, but when you're just saying that they're annoying without giving a reason why, then you gotta examine that a little bit more. Just look into it a little bit more.
Wait, this made me think of something else I wanted to bring up as well, especially Ruby mentioning the man. Taylor Swift. We're bringing in all the Swifties right now. But, you know, a lot of times what happens with women in literature is that, like you said, I think both of you, is that whenever a woman has ambition and she's bold and things like that, and she's not like this timid, shy, you know, things like that, whenever she has like a real ambition and she's willing to go get it, she's called this annoying character, like you both said. And I think a really good example of that is Korra from Legend of Korra, because everybody hates Korra for like she's a bold, strong character. She's literally the avatar, but everybody hates her. They like the whole fandom attacks Korra because they think, you know, she's full of herself and she thinks she's the best and conceited. And in the beginning, I'll admit she is a little bit conceited and, you know, she thinks she's greater than everything that comes her way. But that's not the point. The point is she's ambitious and she's ready to go out there and do her job as the avatar. And what happens is people see that she's not this conventional, traditional woman. You know, she's not shy and timid, and people think, oh, well, that's not good. It's like, well, no, she's just strong. And, you know, I think that's what happens with that. And another, okay, maybe this isn't the best example, because she is a bully. Bullying is bad. Don't bully kids, okay?
Bully.
But
Interrupt this for a quick PSA. Don't bully.
no bullying.
Wise words.
But Clarice, also from Percy Jackson, I love Clarice. Again, not because she's a bully. She is a bully, okay? Don't bully.
She develops,
I'm
guys.
saying
She
it again.
develops.
She does, and that's my point. The point is, she's so much more than just the bully. You know, in the first book, she kind of sucks because she is a bully. By the fifth book, I won't spoil anything because I just realized I was about to. I won't spoil anything, but she has this really intimate scene where she just has so much emotion, and you can see it very clearly. And she's strong. She's brave.
Yeah.
She's not enough.
Yes. And then bringing up this example again, oh my gosh, Selena Sardarthian? I don't know how to say her name.
You
From
can't
Throne of
pronounce
Glass.
anything today.
I'm sorry, I'm trying. But bringing up her again, she is ambitious and she's conceited and she's all these things that we see in characters like Korra, who are very hated. But I think the difference with Selena is she's very sexualized, and I think that that's why she's more beloved, because she's like quote unquote sexy and flirtatious and just all these different things, and I think that that redeems her, and I think that's why she doesn't get labeled as this unlikable character. And looking at all of this and all this conversation, it can feel a little hopeless. I know that even for me, I am a woman, and I'm always like, am I writing my women bad? But there's so much room to hope for better stories, our stories and other people's stories. We grew up with these aforementioned examples, but there's a new generation behind the pages now, and we can make the changes we wish to see in the world and we wish to read in our books.
And here's just a few ideas, because there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do this. But here's a few ideas on where and how to start.
One of the things that you can do is avoid the harmful stereotypes like the ones that we've been discussing all episode long. So things like in teen films and YA fiction, a lot of the time where the bullies were very feminine and they were demonized for being feminine, maybe try not having a very feminine bully whose only characteristic is that she likes pink and is mean. And also maybe try avoiding using females only as plot devices. Allow them to have their own stories, allow them to have agency. Also, maybe don't have really unrealistic female love interests who always have to be pristine and pretty and conform to a very sort of narrow Western standard of beauty. You can tell a meaningful story without using these stereotypes and tropes. And actually, your story will probably be better and more interesting and more developed because of that, because you're going to have fully developed characters and really interesting female characters. So I definitely think that you should just try and see if you can avoid these ones. Write from the heart and stay genuine. And if you were to be in a story, you'd want it to be a real person. You wouldn't want a caricature of yours that serves to push a negative narrative, especially about your gender.
And I think it's important to know that not every female-led story has to be one about finding love. Women are so much more than their relationships. Women are so much more than who they love. And just really try and think outside the box. Women throughout history have been behind inventions and taken part in progress just as much as men. And I think looking at female history, it's obvious how complex and how vital women are to everything, and that includes literature. And try and do females justice, do their history justice, and continue on the legacy, even in fiction.
And last but not least, we want to end this lovely episode with a writing prompt. So this one's more of a self-check on layers of characterization in your characters, and especially your female characters, but it goes back to our initial talking point here. Reflect on your work in progress.
Yes, and think about what we've talked about with misogyny and consider all these questions. What are your characters like? Are you noticing any themes carried over from mainstream YA that bring more harm than good to your narrative? Add more depth to your female characters. What makes your character insecure? What struggles do they face? And especially if they're a woman, consider if you're writing them as well as they could be written. Don't be afraid to make them realistic, not always pretty and not always perfect, because let's be real, nobody is.
Beautiful words from Ruby. So, whether you specialize in novels, screenplays, even poetry, your words matter. Your story does. Your characters do. You do. Think about the influences literature and television have had on you while you're growing up, and try not to make the same mistakes that maybe you have internalized from them. Knowing more about your influences can enable you to write something even better for the next generation. That's all from us, and we'll see you next time writing Cadets.
I've only read the first book. Oh, it's okay. I'm scared. I'll protect you. Oh,
Thank you for listening to the Moving Right Along podcast made possible by the Young Writers Initiative. Tune in next week where we discuss the creepy, the scary, and the horrifying in our horror special. You can follow us on Instagram at Moving Right Along Podcast or find us on tywi.org. And while you're on the website, why not check out the Chapters program where you can bring the URL to the IRL. And there's always fun events going on over on our Discord, The Writers Town. Thank you to everyone who submitted to the chapbook contest, and keep an eye out for an email in early November with the results. Thank you to our amazing team without whom this wouldn't be possible. Queen Bee Simone, You Can Sit With Us, Jasmine, Exactly Like Other Girls, Delaney, and Not Your Mary Sue, Cassette. All sound effects are taken from the Free Sound Project, and all music was from filmmusic.io by Kevin MacLeod. Today you heard Take a Chance and Beauty Flow.